Okay, so I'm here with my good buddy Jeff Lucchese, who I've known since 1994. You were CIO at DHL Airways.
I think I was VP at the time and then moved up to CIO later. But yeah, definitely.
Airways.
Airways.
Because Systems was down the street.
Systems was down the street. DHL had 3 CIOs. We had the Americas, one in Europe and Middle East, and then the other one was Asia Pac.
Yeah. You know, these days you can track a package, right? And every freight guy has a track your package thing.
Right.
But when you guys were doing track and trace in the 90s, that was unheard of.
Well, it was, we had to do it. It's a low margin business. And we were focused on business to business, not the FedEx type of home delivery and UPS. And we really wanted the business for the large companies like HP and other ones. And so we developed that, and the reason we hired Taos and the reason I met you was we wanted to do it on Sun systems. And you guys had all the Sun expertise for Unix in the whole valley. And that's a great story in itself.
We cornered the market.
You
It
cornered
was really
the market
cool, yeah.
on Solaris
Yeah.
at the time, and I had heard about Taos, and at the time there weren't infrastructure companies. They were really specific. You were a specific Unix shop.
Yeah.
INS was networking, and the whole thing was split up, and then they got bought by Lucent. And Taos had the best Unix people around. And you and I met, and the rest was history.
Yeah.
I think I brought in 4 or 5
Yeah, no, I
Solaris
remember.
people.
I remember some of your team too.
That was great stuff.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Was DHL Systems, DHL Airways, were you guys by accident in the Bay Area, or was that planned?
Well,
Because I don't think track and trace could have happened without the brains of INS, brains of Taos, brains that you could hire.
right. I think it was just by accident. It was just how the company developed. I mean, eventually it became more European-centric, but it was primarily a U.S. Based company the way it started. It became a very complex company. We were in 238 countries, in the 90s. It was just crazy.
But how lucky that you did this in the Valley, because what I've noticed is the further away you go from Silicon Valley, the shittier your software gets, right? Just by, like even Facebook, Zuckerberg was smart to move Facebook from Cambridge to the Bay Area.
Well, I remember...
Because he could have hired smart people there, but it just
easily.
wouldn't have been the same.
When we were at Taos, this is way back in the earlier days when we were partnering with Avar from Los Angeles. They had relationships in Colorado. And we were talking about DevOps and Puppet and Chef and all that.
Didn't know what the hell we were talking about.
And I went to Colorado and met with software engineers, and I said, well, you should look at Chef, and they had no idea what I was talking about. And then 6 months later, they called us and said, hey, we want to talk to you about this stuff.
We want to talk to you about this new thing called Chef. And we're like idiots. We've been at this for like 2 years already.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the way the Valley worked, and it's not snobbery, it's just fact.
It is what it is.
I mean, on the East Coast in the 90s, they had network companies like Wellfleet.
Yeah.
And they were going up against Cisco. And Cisco crushed them.
Yeah. The way it worked at Taos was that we did not have dogma on anything.
Right.
We just listened to our customer, right? That was one of our mantras, just the customer's always right, and for crying out loud, listen to them. So, if we heard something like Puppet once, we go, oh, that's interesting. Heard it twice, oh my God, okay. You hear it a third time, you go, we better look into this Puppet thing because there may be a trend.
Right.
So we always transformed our people to the next thing by letting the market tell us.
And quickly.
Yeah.
Very quickly. There was really a training machine in the company. And this isn't touting Taos, but it's just the fact. The way that Taos grew up was innovation. We trained people constantly. And we had people come back 4 and 5 times as employees.
Yeah.
Because they knew they would get the latest at Taos.
Yep. And then in 2006 and 2007, you and I would have dinner occasionally, and you'd say, Rick, I'm telling you, you got to start a managed services business. And I did want to start one, but I didn't want to work that hard, to tell you the truth, and because I knew it was going to take work, and I already had a cash cow, if you will, with the consulting.
Right.
And you said, I've got some talent in Boise, Idaho, because you were working for
BMHC.
Building Materials Holding Corp, headquartered in San Francisco, but all operations in Boise. And you said, the talent up there is pretty good. And then BMHC imploded, so you were a free agent. So we hired you to build out our managed services. So tell us what drove you to that, and thank you, because we were one of the few companies that has managed to, add a service adjacency.
Right.
That even though it seems like it's kind of the same stuff, it's not.
Right, it's
Because
not.
one is consulting and one is operations.
Very different.
So tell us about that a little
Well,
bit.
it's funny. I mean, when I look back, so I've been through two blow-ups through the internet blow-up, and I made it through with
Choreo.
Choreo, and then the housing blow-up, which BMHC squeaked by, and was acquired later after I left.
Dude, I bought that stock at 9.
Yeah.
I was celebrating when it was 90.
Yep.
I sold it at 1.
In 1 year, in 1 year, it went from I think 20,
Thank you.
20 to the mid 90s, and then the whole housing industry collapsed.
Yeah.
But you and I had been talking, and one of the things that we noticed in trends was, in the 90s, everybody outsourced to India. In the early 2000s, things were getting redistributed, and more companies with software engineers wanted to outsource the work, but they also wanted it close in the same time zone. And that's when you and I started talking about Boise, Idaho. And the thing that I thought you and I thought about was, Taos had this plan, design, build, but they didn't have a run function for the customer. And to your point, listening to the customers, right? We were constantly always going, what do they need? What do they need? This filled a gap. And we turned it up right in the middle of the collapse of the home industry and a recession.
Yeah.
And we hired our first employee, which was a fantastic person I worked with named Patty Schrum at BMHC to run the help desk up there. And she was the first, and then 225 employees later, it just took off.
It really, really did. And when I talked to customers, there were some that were like, oh, you're doing it in the US, that's great. There were some that were like, we can do this cheaper ourselves or in India. And it was like, more power to you. But the guys that really got it, got so much value out of what we did, and then it just grew like crazy because of word of mouth, right?
It was the value.
And they were like, people couldn't believe it. Taos had actually built a managed services that worked. Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, it was the value that made it sell, because we had tangible things to show customers. It was this way before, and then when we came in and managed your systems, this is what you got. And we always did quarterly business reviews with executive level people and showed them exactly what was happening.
Yeah, those were really fun years.
It was great. I mean,
and then we came out of recession and things got good again.
It got good. And I remember in 2012, you had it was really kind of a kickstart of the year meeting with a lot of the key employees. And you said, hey, we're at 45 million. He says, how can we grow? What can we do? And then 3 years later, we were in the high 80s, 90 million. So in 3 years.
We doubled the business in 3 years.
We doubled the business in 3 years, and we wanted to grow more, and that's why Bunker was brought in.
Yeah. Maybe later you'll interview me, but 2001, that recession, A, it was Armageddon in Silicon Valley. B, Silicon Valley had never gone through something like that, so everybody panicked. It was awful. And when the 2009 recession came along, I think we had just had one 8 years earlier, and we were like, bring it on. We're going to be more calm. Every CEO was better. I grew up a lot during the 2001 thing. So yeah, I think we handled it
well, I think the one thing that you really did in a wise way was you spent money during a recession.
Yeah.
Most companies pull back. And what that does is you can't innovate in this type of business if you pull back the spending. You've got to keep going and moving forward. And I remember how upset
poor CFO Mary, man, she used to gulp at all.
She was so angry. at you for
They go, Rick, oh my God, yeah, I overpaid you. I had to pay you more.
Well, I just dug in on what I felt was fair salary, and she didn't like that.
I remember. Mary, we love you.
We love you, Mary.
Oh man. So now you're retired in 16, 17. You've been sitting on some boards, and there's one that I'm not a part of, but that I give money to, which I think is unbelievable that you're doing this. So tell us about the Samaritan House in San Mateo.
Yeah, a friend of mine introduced me to it. We used to go to their annual dinners, and they had a big gala every year, and they'd have an auction. And one year he said, "You want to go actually see where your money's working and going?" So I got a tour of Samaritan House, and just some background. Samaritan House, the focus is on working poor and to keep them from losing their home and being on the street. So it's a really a great cause, because these are not people generally that aren't living on the street. So you don't really see them. They're restaurant workers, landscapers, you name it. They're working, most of them. And at the end of the day, you don't really think about, is my waiter hurting try to pay rent? Because most of their salary is going to rent. And you have a lot of families doubling up and tripling up in homes because they can't afford to be on their own. So when COVID hit the county, San Mateo County, initially the amount of Hispanic population that got hit was disproportionately high. And when you looked at the data, it was because you had maybe 2 families in a house. And somebody come home with COVID. Well,
They all got it.
Everybody get it in the household. So my friend introduced me to Samaritan House. He introduced me to the CEO, who is very dynamic and loves what he does, and really is passionate about the organization. So I started off, I said, I'd like to do something. He said, well, we need help on computing and IT systems.
Oh, they stuck you with the IT.
You know what? It was fabulous. I loved it because everybody there was very engaged, and they needed to upgrade their systems and take it to a new level for analytics of data. So I started there. Then I was asked to be on the board, and now I'm on 3 committees in the board. And I really enjoy the people. I enjoy what it does. It's an incredible organization because they manage the money in an unbelievable way. Every dollar.
Rent assistance, medical, and groceries.
We have 2 clinics, free clinics. We help. We get subsidies from the government and from corporations and from people like you, just regular people who want to help. And it allows us to do things to help people stay in their homes.
And once or twice a week, they drive up somewhere, they open their trunk, and you guys drop off a few bags of groceries.
Well, we have grocery programs where they'll come. Now they come into the office, and they don't actually go in the office, but they drive through. And we just load their vehicles with groceries.
That is so amazing. Yeah.
And we have clothes for kids. We have backpacks for back to school. We've got, we have dining rooms. We have everything to help these people so they can work.
Yeah, the Latino community that I know really, really well, and I'm always joking with them at the car wash, they work so freaking hard.
They work hard,
and
man.
they're working for
their
minimum
ass off.
wage, and and not a lot. If you think about inflation, without that labor pool, we would be paying triple for all the shit that we eat.
Well, they get killed too. I mean, if you look at what affects poor families, it's groceries and gas. Well, what are the 2 worst things right now in inflation, right? It's groceries and gas. So they're really hurting now. I mean, the lines that we have are much bigger than they were, 3 years ago.
Yeah,
And
so we'll print the name of your org, and people out there, you want to give a great cause. I think this is.
If anybody wants to contact me about it, I'd be happy to talk to them about it.
Samaritan House.
Samaritan House.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, very, very cool. My friend, it's always
Rick,
great to catch up with you.
Glad to see you.
And we'll be doing some more of this.
Absolutely.
All right, man.